Hello there guys, it is Panman back with part 2 to the complete beginner's guide. This one's going to be pretty much the entire review of the unit roster of the game. I'm just going to start back from the beginning so it can all be in one video because server maintenance, it was unexpected, happened at the end of the last video. So we're just going to do the whole thing again now, and this way can also sort it by rarity. So it'll hopefully be more convenient to look through for whatever unit you're wanting to look at then. Alright, so before we get into the unit review though, I would like to say a few things. First off, friendly reminder, if you have not bought your classified recruitment package for Quartz, do that. And also, if you have not yet re-rolled your shop, do that as well. Now, I would also like to make a few addendums to what I said during the last video about what to farm. So, at the last video I said to farm Gutter Rat Extermination 3-4. Not 3-4. Gutter Rat Extermination 4. Or Contract 3-3. And I still think you should do that for a little bit, just to get a little bit of a baseline of gear. However, actually the best place to get gear right now is, believe it or not, Raid. If you have a bunch of friends and you participate in a bunch of raids, you will be getting a ton of these tokens, as well as good gear here, like tier 6 SSR gear. You can get some tier 7 SSR gear. This is the best gear in the game right here that you can get from Raid, so make sure you do this, as many as you can before the reset. With your tokens as well, you'll be getting a bunch of them, and you can go to the HQ and workshop, and you can craft these into tier 5, tier 7 gear. And this is going to be the best gear in the game, so you want to get this gear. This is what you should be farming. And to farm this, you're going to need info, so actually, probably better than farming Gutter Rat Extermination is farming the supply operations. You can do this 3 times a day for each mission. There's 2 missions here. Small Scale Covert Ops version 1 and 2. Farm these for info. This one gives about, I believe, 1,200 or something per run, and this one gives a little bit less. But ideally you want to farm both. Another thing you're going to want to farm to get your gear to the highest strength possible, it might be a little bit hard starting out until you get a more built up account, but farming Unpremeditated Covert Ops version 1 and version 2 for tuning binaries is going to get your gear a lot stronger as well. You should be farming these as well every day. Now, after that, you should be farming your side story characters. Some of these characters are very, very good, and you can only get characters like John Mason through the side stories. You cannot get them normally, so just farm these for like a little bit over a month, and you'll get the character. And then you can choose to keep farming it for dupes, so you can save some fusion cores, or you could choose to just stop farming there, but at least get the characters. Now, the other thing that's going to be the best endgame farming, if you have cleared everything else, this is going to be some of the hardest content in the game. These challenge missions here, as you can see, these rotate daily. There's one for coin, one for these enhancement modules, one for info, and so on and so forth. These are going to be some of the hardest missions in the game. They pretty much all have little gimmicks. Like, for example, Chloe's info search. There's going to be some invisible healers here that will keep the boss at almost full HP unless you have something to deal with the healing. So in order to clear this map, you basically need to use a character that reduces healing. Thankfully, we have Lee Jisoo for free, and she reduces healing by 90%. So make sure you use her here if you're having trouble clearing this mission. And you can farm this 3 times a day. Make sure you do this 3 times a day. A little bit harder. This one's probably going to be a little bit harder. This one's also tuning binaries. You can get this 3 times a day. When you can finally farm this, make sure you do that. And this is going to be your late game farming, so focus on this if you can clear it. Also, friendly reminder, if you have not bought out the entire event shop, buy out the entire event shop. It should be looking like this. Alright, with that out of the way, let us continue on with the unit review, starting back at SSR. I am going to be going through by rarity and ranking them based off of the usefulness that I see on SCA and my personal experience with them, as well as looking at just like their abilities, what content they're used for, and if they're good, if there's better units than them, so on and so forth. So starting off, Seo Yoon. This character is really good in PvE, bad in PvP. User in raid, user in content where you need to get your time down, because her ability will increase the attack of everyone by 30%, and it's good. It's good. Also decreases enemy attack speed with her with a special skill. So she's a very good buffer in PvE content. If you have her, use her. Xiaolin, this character is the best sniper in the game. She does a ton of damage. She has guaranteed crit damage. Basic attacks always inflict crit damage on her passive, so give her good crit damage gear, and you will have an incredibly formidable character. Additionally, eventually, she will get a retrofit, and by retrofit, I mean a rearm. She'll actually get 2. Which make her even stronger. She'll get Nest Keeper Xiaolin, and she'll get Kestrel Xiaolin. Both of these are good, so hold on to them if you have dupes. And meanwhile, use her. She is very, very good. Orca. This is another character that you get for free just by doing the starter new player missions, and you can farm her as well from the side story. She is a decent damage dealer. Eventually she'll get sort of outclassed because she doesn't do much else except for just damage. But if you have her, you get it for free, and you might as well use her. She's a pretty decent filler unit that you might want to replace later on. Stronghold. This is the weaker of the defender soldier units, and you can get him for free through the same side story you get King for free. But I would not really recommend using him. He's not that great. Terminator. This unit is a very good PvE unit. Not really that good in PvP. He's too squishy in PvP. But in PvE, he has a defense break here. 20% defense break, which is one of the best debuffs in the game. So use him in raid, use him in consortium co-op. He will do wonders. Titan. This is probably the best mech in the game at the moment, which is not saying much because there's not that many mechs in the game that are good at the moment. But he's going to be the unit you're building around. He's going to be very good in PvP, especially at the beginning. He's also decent in PvE, but he just costs a lot. Eventually, you'll be able to get deployment resources +1 when deployed, so you can get him basically to 5 cost functionally. And he's going to be decent. You'll use him in your mech teams. If you're playing mech, use him. If you're not playing mech, ignore him. I would not recommend trying to pick him up from like your SSR select or anything like that, but if you get him, feel free to use him if you like him. Maria, this unit's free, and you should use her. She is very good in PvE content because she provides some very, very good buffs, attack and HP for allies. She also can, if you get her ultimate skill off, she will summon a ton of mechs that I think equal like something crazy like 15 cost and value. It's a lot of value on her ultimate skill. The only problem with her is that you need good cooldown gear to really make her shine, because her cooldowns are pretty long, but they're extremely powerful. But if you do use her, if you do get her, which you can get her for free, then use her. She's actually very good, especially in long-form PvE content. In PvP, she can be a little bit harder to use because she doesn't actually provide much when she immediately enters. She's more of a long-term unit, so she can just die before she provides much, but in PvE, she's good. Kyle Wong. This is a marksman, a ranger that does pretty dang good damage and also provides a lot of utility. He's going to be very good early on. Eventually he'll get a little bit outscaled, fall off a little bit, but he's pretty dang good. He does % health damage, and he can summon a bulwark, and if you upgrade this to fully, he'll summon 2, which will draw aggro away from units. So he's sort of an off tank in that sense, but he does good damage. He provides some defense. He's good. If you get him, use him. If you pull, I don't necessarily recommend pulling for him, but if you do get him, he's good. ATL1 Lincoln. This is a mech in the game and not a very good one. It cost 4 for a striker, although in reality he feels more like a defender. He's very tanky. He doesn't do that good damage, but he actually does really well against air units because it has a anti-aircraft gun that shoots up, and it also has a special skill. It'll fire a rocket at air units. First targets air units within range, and he actually does very good damage to air units. So if you end up getting him early on and you haven't cleared your air stages yet, your simulation air stages, then he might be a decent option there to tank and also do some damage to the air. And he's also going to be good in some Shadow Palace, some late game PvE content where there's just pure air units, but in general not worth using. ATF-35 Thunderbolt. This is a air unit that only hits other air units, and it's not very good. It's probably only going to be used in PvP because if the enemy has no air units, it'll go straight to the enemy ship and start shooting at it. So it can be good in rush comps, but in general, I would say unless you're very late game and you just have resources that you can throw at it, don't use it. There's better strategies and better units, so skip it. Astarosa de Chevalier. This unit used to cost 5 on SCA, and she was good then at the beginning, although she kind of fell off. Now she's cost 4, and she is still pretty good, although she'll probably fall off again. However, you should keep hold of her and use her because later on she will get one of the best rearms in the game, which will make her extremely powerful and meta yet again. Use her in Dive 50. And in hard PvE and PvP content, everywhere, she's going to be one of the strongest units in the game, so hold on to her. She is very, very good. Elizabeth Pendragon. This is a unit that is pretty much a pure damage dealer. She'll be pretty good in PvP at the beginning because her ability, when she enters, she will just throw some knives at whatever enters and then sort of fall back to your behind your units. So you can use her to one-shot the enemy backline and then use her to run back to your line and start doing some more damage, which is the dream. In reality, though, eventually, that might work for now, but eventually once people get their gear sorted out and they get some tankier units in the backline, she probably won't one-shot, so she'll just hit, run back, and then only do damage, not provide much utility. So there's really just better options all around. But she's an okay unit. If you get her, she's okay to build. She will also eventually get a rearm, Blue Blood rearm here, which is pretty decent. It doesn't break her, but she'll be good. So keep hold of her. Shinjia. This is a unit that you get for free if you spend money on the game. So if you spend even 99 cents, you get it for free as a bonus. And she's an okay unit. She provides pretty decent buffs and has a clone that will knock back enemies and do some damage. But there's some other options. She's sort of just like a mid-tier unit. If you have her, you can use her and get quite a bit of mileage out of her, but don't feel bad if you don't use her. Yeah, she's okay. Her stats are a little bit low, but it works out because she gets some pretty good buffs, like increased attack speed. So very good in stuff like Raid. Lee Soo-yoon. This is a meatball defender that will pretty much just go down, has a little bit of CC, and sort of just get in there and do damage and tank a bit. She costs 4, so a little bit expensive, but if you have her, she can be just a decent filler unit just for her base stats, especially in the more early PvE content. In PvP, there's just units with better utility, and late game PvE, there's units with better utility as well. But she's a decent filler unit if you want to use her. She's also kind of cute, so go ahead to use her if you get her. But there's better units. Na Yu-bin. This guy actually has pretty good stats for the cost, but he benefits striker teams very, very well. So he's very good in certain teams, on certain PvE missions where there's strikers, like restrictions where you can only use certain types of units like strikers. But outside of striker-only teams, he's not that great. In PvP, striker teams are also not the greatest, but he's an okay unit just to drop for the stats early on. Eventually, you might want to phase him out or use him for just specific content. Admin Sword Fighter. This is one of the better soldier units in the game. She does pretty good damage. Has a lot of evasion. You get 2 of them. When one of them dies, the other one restores all their HP and increases their attack and evade for 30 seconds. And so she can actually be surprisingly tanky due to her evade. And yeah, she does good damage. So if you get her, use her. She's good. Gaeun. This is probably most people's waifu at the moment. She does tons of damage. She's an awakened unit in disguise, and she has some stuns. She has good utility. She can be used everywhere. It decreases target attack speed, stuns. It's good unit. Just use her if you get her. She'll carry you through the game. Lumi, this is a PvP unit, and even in PvP she's not that good. She's a rush unit that if your enemy has an answer to the rush, then it's really bad. She only costs 3, but all that she does is run at the enemy base, the enemy ship, and while she does damage it pretty quickly, that's all that she does. She doesn't do much else. So she's god-awful in PvE, don't even try. But in PvP, she can be okay. I would advise not building her though. She will eventually get a skin though, which is pretty nice. John Mason, this is a unit you get for free, and you should use him because he's very good, especially in Guild Raid and Consortium Co-op, because he silences things, seals damaged targets. He does very good stuff for Raid and for Consortium Co-op, and you should get him because he's free, so use him. Jane Doe, another unit you get for free. She is an evasion-based assassin. She does really good damage, actually, but she doesn't provide much else other than just damage. So, get her for free, use her as a filler unit. Other than that, she's probably not going to be the centerpiece of any team, but she's okay. Yang Harim, this is the best supporter in the game, and you should get her if you can, because she's on ban right now. She should be the thing you pull for the most. She will carry you through everything for years to come. Even in SEA right now, a year later, she is almost mandatory in some late game content. She is that good. All the buffs that she provides are just too insane. So make sure you get her, use her. She is very good. She is the Tamarin of this game, except she's also good in PvP. Kang Seung, this is a unit you get for free through the police side story, and she's actually a very good soldier, one of the best soldiers in the game. When you spawn her in, she's very cheap, she costs 2, and she'll come with a stronghold instead of a shieldman if you level up her passive to 5. So she has provides a little bit of frontline as well as her backline damage. She buffs your soldiers a lot, so if you're using a soldier team, you better make sure you use her. And she's also good against counters, so pretty good in PvP. She'll eventually be part of the meta team with Replacer King and Blue Bridge Mark II, but for now she's also just a very good unit in soldier teams, so get her for free and then use her. Lee Yumi, this is probably the best evasion tank in the game at the moment. That is SR, and she only costs 3. She has a lot of tankiness, she'll survive for a long time. And yeah, not worth pulling for, but she's a very good unit. If you do end up getting her, then make sure to build her. She will be one very good tank that you'll use forever. Ju Shiyung, this is gender bent Ju Shi, the other, the main character, the gender bent version of the main character, and she's another counter unit, and she's decent. In general, there's some better options than her that do more damage, but she has a counterattack that is pretty decent. If you get her, feel free to use her, otherwise, don't feel bad. She is only mediocre. Karen Wong, this is actually a very good unit, especially against air units. She's currently on banner, but I would recommend not pulling for her because there's going to be better stuff coming up, and she will eventually get, you'll eventually get her. She has a bulwark just like Kyle Wong, her sort of gender-bent version, and she does a lot of damage to air units. The annoying thing about her, though, is that she has this animation when she switches between close-ranged units and like her long-range attacks, where she changes her gun and it takes a few seconds, and so she loses some damage there. But overall, she's a very competent sniper, and eventually she gets some very good skins. As you can see, she will eventually get some very nice skins. If you get her, use her, she's good. Nanohara Chifuyu, this is one of the best units in the game as well, next to Yang Harim and Gaiyun. She is an extremely competent striker that is even used a year later in SEA. She has good HP, good offensive stats. She seals bosses, or not seals bosses. She seals everything except for bosses with her special skill. And she has a defense break. She just has all the good debuffs that you would ever want. She does good damage. She'll be your front line. Build her, use her, love her. She's very, very good. Nanahara Chinatsu, this is her sister, and she's a pretty decent healer. She provides some nice buffs, like damage resistance, and up to 25% damage resistance, and she provides a little bit of HP healing, but it's not really as good as other HP healers. If you want just a straight healer, don't use her. And she also has an attack increase on her ultimate skill. So she is an okay healer. An okay support. I would recommend building other supports before her, like Yang Harim is going to be your number one, and if you want a straight healer, build Evelyn or Claudia Nelson. Hayami Sanai, this is a unit that used to be a meme when she cost 4, but since she costs 3, she's actually pretty good. She does very good damage against large clumps of enemies, so in certain PvE contents, due to her passive skill and her special skill, she'll do big AoE damage and clear out entire mobs for you. She's also very good in the simulation, the defense simulation, where a bunch of siege enemies will rush your ship, because her passive will do more damage to them, and yeah, she's good for that. Overall, she's more of a mid-tier sniper because Xiaolin exists, which is just going to be better than her. So, if you have her, feel free to build her and use her as a sniper in one of your secondary teams, but don't feel bad if you don't have her. Rosaria Lafride, this is one of the best rangers in the game. She's flying, which makes her hard to hit. She has a passive skill which keeps her alive for 4 seconds upon deployment, so she's guaranteed to get off damage, and when she gets off damage, she gets off a lot of damage. So if you get her, use her. If you are pulling for Yang Harim and you get Yang Harim and you still have blue tickets left over to recruit, go for Rosaria. She's very, very good. Frederick Doma, this is a unit that is pretty decent actually. He's got good stats, and he's a little bit of a trickster. As you can see, he can, for every 8th incoming damage, he will become invincible and move behind the enemies, and hopefully get off some damage on the back line. He also has a decrease in healing, so you can use him for certain stages where healing will be prevalent on PvE, like some later challenge stages. Yeah, if you have him, feel free to use him. He's pretty decent. Not mandatory or anything, but he's good to have. Not worth pulling for either if the banner for him comes out. Dominic King Reginald, this guy is a meatball. He does nothing except tank. He's a very selfish tank. He tanks very well, but he does nothing else really. He'll just he'll do some AoE damage, but it's not much damage. He's a tank after all. And so he's really just there to soak damage and does nothing else. At 4 cost, he's a little bit too hard to justify using in most contents, aside from just a filler unit. But in PvP, if he is up to 1 or 2 points, so he costs 3 or 2, then he becomes quite a beast, but otherwise, don't really worry about him. He's not that great. Awakened Hilda, this is the unit that you should have gotten for when you rerolled. She's very good, and she'll carry you through content for a year. She'll be very good when Dive 50 comes out. She'll be good in pretty much everything. Eventually, she will fall off a little bit, but for the foreseeable future, she is going to be very, very good. So, use her, love her. Li Jisoo, you get this unit for free, so might as well use her. She will help you in certain PvE content where there's tons of healing, because she will reduce healing by 90%. Enemy healing units are permanently decreased by 90%, and attack speed is decreased. The only problem with her is that she costs quite a bit, 5, but she has some decent stats, and she's sort of like an off-tank in disguise. Although she's a supporter, she also just can be a decent frontliner, like a decent striker unit. So if you get her for free, feel free to build her a little bit. But if you don't want to build her, that's totally fine as well. There are other units that'll be just as good as well. But for certain content, she's definitely going to come in handy. And so I'd say that, especially for the challenge mode contents like the Chloe's info search, she's almost mandatory at the moment, so I'd say feel free to use her, although don't use her in PvP. and she's not something that you can just spam on any team. Einstein's Way, this is the current Battle Pass unit, and she's very, very good. She'll be used for a long, long time in the future, just because they're 2-cost units that have good stats, and you get 2 of them. They're also one of the only counters in the game that spawns 2 units at once, and they just have good stats, good abilities, so yeah, if you want to get the Battle Pass, this is probably the best Battle Pass, the second best Battle Pass that's ever been released for the game. Later on down the line, we'll get a Battle Pass with an Awakened unit called Replacer King, which is going to be the first best. It's going to be the best Battle Pass released ever. This guy is an absolute menace in PvP, but pretty close second. Einstein's Way, good in both PvE and PvP. Get her eventually when she gets a banner of her own once the battle pass is over. Depending on what banners surround her, she might also be pulling for her then. And that is it for SSRs. So moving on to SR. Yumina, this is the protagonist of the game, and you should not really use her because she's god-awful, actually. She costs 4, and she just provides nothing for the cost. For other units that cost 4, you just, like, gain, she just does nothing compared to them. Because, her passive, her skills don't do anything, she just does a little bit of damage, no debuffs. You get a little bit of attack after skill until death for her S5, but it's not really worth investing in her. Eventually, she will get a rearm. And that rearm still does not justify using her. Where is the rearm? Here it is. She will eventually get a rearm, and her rearm is still not that good. So, I mean, she's free, you can farm for her data easily, and so, I mean, you can kind of use her as a filler unit, but in general, there's just things that provide way more value for her. Hilda, this is the best of the 3 starting main characters. She's not the same as Awakened Hilda, so don't think that, oh, I'm using Awakened Hilda, so I shouldn't use normal Hilda. No, you should use both, they're both good. Awakened Hilda will buff your counters, all of them, including herself, 10% attack and crit. She does good damage when she enters the battlefield. She'll do a little bit of AoE damage around her, and she has some AoE around. She'll also, her ultimate skill provides a little bit of invincibility, so if you want to play on auto or on manual, you can time that to dodge abilities. And yeah, she's just a good unit overall. So good off tank that also buffs your units. She does pretty much it all, so use her, she's good. Zhu Shiyun, this is a counter unit that got nerfed multiple times because he used to be too good. We have the nerf version because he used to be able to counter awakened units, and that was just too good. He was dominant everywhere. So now he can't counter awakened units, but he's still pretty dang good as just a filler unit. There's other units overall that are sort of better than him, but if you want just on a second or third team, Zhu Shiyun, build him. He's good. You can get his data for free, and you should do so, honestly. His counterattack is really strong, stuns targets, and yeah, he'll do you well. Yujin, this is another unit that you'll get a ton of just from pulling as an SR. You can also get her data for free from the one of the side stories, the school day side story, and she's not that good. She's sort of just been outscaled by other units that have been added in the game, and she's sort of forgotten. She's a striker that's meant to be a bit of an off tank, but she doesn't do enough damage to justify her relatively low defensive stats, and she'll just die before she does anything of real value. So I would advise not building her. Eventually, she will get a rearm, and this rearm will turn her into a sniper that actually has pretty low range despite being a sniper. Her range is a little bit between a tank and like a striker, or not a striker, a tank and a ranger. So it's mid-range unit, but she looks good on paper. She does do decent damage, but in reality she gets hit by too many AoEs hitting the front line to actually get off much damage before dying herself. So she still doesn't become that good. She's definitely more usable once the rearm happens, but still not that good. Kim Sobin, this is a unit that you'll get for free with unit data from farming one of the one of the supply runs, and she's really good in PvE. Don't use her in PvP. She's awful in PvP. But in PvE, she does very, very good damage, single target, because she shoots very quickly. She's very good against soldiers and mechs, which you'll be fighting a lot of in the story, and in a lot of challenge missions, so she's very good there. Use her in raid, use her in pretty much everything PvE. She'll do you well. Rhino, this is a PvP unit that immediately rushes towards the enemy ship and does damage. He's pretty tanky actually, and does pretty good damage, so if the enemy has no way to block it, then it can be really good cheese strat in PvP, but there's other strats that are better, and he has no use in PvE, so if you want to build him eventually once you've got your account a little bit built up, go ahead, but in general, I'd say don't worry about him. Buzzard, this is a unit that's actually a pretty decent free-to-play unit. I'm pretty sure you can farm him from a supply stage as well. And it does decent damage. It's flying, so it's hard to kill. But in general, there's just other things that provide more utility for the cost. So I wouldn't recommend doing too much with it, but it's a good filler unit for a mech team. Although eventually better mechs will come along. Recoilless Gunner, this is a unit that is meant to counter ground mechs. As you can see, anti-mech damage, 100%, plus 100% anti-mech damage, and also good against anti-siege. But the thing is, siege and mech are very niche at the moment, especially since none of the good mechs are coming out, and even after the good mechs come out, she's still not really good to use, so I would advise not using her aside from very niche situations. Probably not worth building. MRLS, I've never seen anyone use this unit. It's pretty bad. Supposed to be good against soldiers and mechs, although, as I said previously, mechs are pretty bad. This thing just sits back, has no tankiness, so it dies to like a fart that wafts its way, and doesn't do enough damage to justify its cost. Don't use it. Scout, this unit is another unit that just does nothing to justify its cost. Has a little bit of buffed HP and buffed attack, but it's sort of just being a jack of all trades and a master of none, which is not what you want in this game. It just does nothing for the 3 cost. Sweeper, this unit actually does pretty decent damage. The only problem is that its animations are really jank. The grenade launcher animations are very slow, and so he doesn't shoot very quickly, and he doesn't actually do that much in practice. So, pretty niche unit, not recommended. Blacktail, I've never seen anyone use this successfully. This unit just sort of sits around and will drop some scouts on the ground after it dies, three on the ground after it dies. Don't use it, it's bad. Reaper, this is another unit that will just sort of fly around and it'll drop its bombs and then leave and restore 1 deployment. It does nothing permanent though, so not worth using. This unit's pretty bad. Arachne, this is a actual decent mech in the sort of sea of trash mechs we have at the moment, although even still it's not that good. It just doesn't provide much for the 3 cost. You get 2 of them at a time. It's good against anti-air actually. If you are struggling with the anti-air simulation, you might want to invest in this a little bit because it does plus 50% anti-air damage with the max level passive. But in general, I'd say not a very good unit. Benedict Constantine, this is a tank and not one of the worst tanks in the game at the moment, to be honest. It doesn't provide much utility, it has some damage resistance, and has a little bit of stunning stuns for a little bit, but in general, there's just better tanks to use. I'd advise skipping him. Lin Jian, this is a unit you can farm for free through supply missions, and you should. She is very, very, very good in all PvE content and even decent in PvP. You can use her in PvP as well. She is the deployment resource battery in this game. As soon as you deploy her, she instantly restores 1 deployment point, and actually 2 deployment points with her passive skill max leveled. And once you get her ultimate skill leveled up entirely, you will get a bunch of more deployment resources. So use her in raid, she will get out your entire team a lot quicker. And yeah, she'll be very good for that. Get her, use her. Jake Walker, this is a unit you can get for free from Delta 7, which is the last side mission at the moment, side story at the moment, and he's sort of just a mediocre bruiser. He's a filler unit, as filler as units come. He has decent tankiness and decent attack stats, but he just sort of gets in there and is a bruiser and does some damage and then leaves. But if you want to build him, as just like a filler unit in like a second or third squad, then he'll be okay, but he will get outpaced fairly quickly. Sylvia Lena Cooper. This unit is very good. You get it for free from a pre-registration reward, and you should use her. She stuns targets for 4 seconds, long-ass stun on mechs with her special skill. And mechs and corrupted objects, so she's very good in PvE because you'll be fighting a lot of corrupted objects as well. So, for example, in the air simulation, her special skill, you drop her down, her special skill will stun the entire air blob, and it'll give you some time to deploy more stuff. Her ultimate skill is just firing an actual nuke on things. It does a ton of damage, but in general, you're going to want to build her in a mech team because she increases hit, evade by 20% and increases attack by 10% on mechs on the field. So if you're building a mech team, use her. And even if you're not building a mech team, she's still pretty good for just damage and CC. So yeah, use her. Peacekeeper. This is an infantry unit that is pretty bad, pretty mediocre in my opinion. It just doesn't do much for the cost, has pretty mediocre stats, and every 4th basic attack they launch a grenade that sort of doesn't do much as well, so I would advise not using this unit at all. They're pretty bad. The Apache, this unit is also bad. I've never seen anyone use this. It deploys an assault trooper every 5 seconds, and at the cost of the HP of the ship itself. And if it gets shot down, it'll drop supply troopers and regenerate 1 deployment point. The problem is it costs 4. It's pretty expensive, and it provides very little value over a long period of time. So it's just too jank to work. The ATB-1B Spear, another unit that I've never seen anyone use. It just flies around dropping bombs, and it'll, once it escapes, it restores a little bit of deployment points. But for 3 cost, there's better things you can spend your money on. Don't use this unit, really. Aureus, this is going to be an actual decent healer. I'd say she's probably the 3rd best healer in the game at the moment, behind Claudia and behind Evelyn. When you drop her down, she will immediately heal 10% of HP for all allies, so she can be pretty clutch. She will also cast a barrier with a special skill immediately, which will be pretty decent. It's a pretty fat barrier, and it'll be good until Na Yu Bin, Awakened Na Yu Bin comes out, because Awakened Na Yu Bin will just Uno reverse your shielding, and you will be having a bad time. But until then, if you need a healer for your 3rd team, use her. Liv Allen, this is a pretty mediocre unit, another filler unit that if you want to put it in your 3rd or 4th squad, then it's debatable whether you should use her or not. She doesn't really, she has some evasion attack speed, as she stays on the field more often than, but in general, there's better units that provide way more value for the cost that are get online way quicker than her, so I'd advise not really using her. Laura Beatrix, this unit's pretty bad at the moment, although it's good in theory because she'll spawn a cat that at the moment doesn't really do anything, but that's really the problem. She has 2 units that don't, it's 2 units that do nothing alone. However, you should hold on to her because eventually she will get a refit, a rearm, which makes her an extremely powerful PvP unit and also buffs her up quite considerably for PvE. Once you get her rearm, her CAD will actually be unkillable. It'll just do insane damage, be unkillable, and it'll be very good. So save her for then, don't use her now. Evelyn Keller, this is the best healer in the game. She's flying, which makes her hard to kill. She provides a buff with her ultimate skill. She'll heal every 3rd basic attack, and she will also heal with her special skill as soon as she enters the battlefield. It's on a pretty low cooldown, and it will be even lower cooldown assuming you put CDR sets on her. And she also adds some damage resistance on her special skill, so in that healing circle on the ground, you'll have damage resistance. She just is an insane healer. Get her, use her. You can farm her for free through through one of the supply missions, and you should if you don't have her. Although you should eventually pick her up through recruit and use her a lot. She will be the best healer for you. Roy Burnett, this is actually a very good unit for PvE and god-awful for PvP. So once you get to late game PvE and you get to raids and consortium co-op, use him there because he has just all the debuffs. It increases incoming damage to enemies for 10%, and actually 15% at max level. It makes them lose attack speed. and also will decrease defense by 25%. Fat defense break. It might actually be one of the highest in the game. It is extremely good in raid. So use them in raid, use them in consortium co-op, and in some PvE stages that you need some more damage and debuffing to get through. But if you're PvE, don't touch them. Colonel Sanders. This is a tank that is decent as like sort of a filler tank in a third or second team if you need one. Although I would advise using just other R units rather than him. So I'd say on SEA, probably worth skipping this unit. But you can farm him for you can farm him for free, and he does have a decent stun. When you drop him down, he'll taunt things and get some damage resistance to stay alive. So he's okay. If you get him, feel free to use him. But otherwise, there's better units to use, better tanks that'll be coming out, and better tanks in the game already. Gabriel, this is a tower, which already makes it pretty hard to use because towers don't move, and he just sits there and and is meant to sort of be a defensive unit. And I've never seen anyone use him, and you probably should not use him in most situations. He's not that good. Li Jin, this is a sort of the only mage in the game. She has some fire skills. It's just that the stats in them are not good enough to really do anything. So I would advise not using her. Cool in theory, bad in practice. Eddie Fisher, this is a unit you get for free through the supply mission, or through one of the side stories, the first side story, the Orca one. And you should. He is an extremely good buffer for soldiers and counters. He only costs 2, so extremely cheap. And he will increase soldiers' attack by 10% and damage resistance, as well as increasing passive skill here. Also increases counters, counter damage resistance and attack. So damage resistance and attack for both soldiers and counters buffed by 10%. So pretty dang good. There's some people have different opinions on how you should build them. I'd say since he's a buffer, you should probably build them with defensive stats in mind. So HP set and armor set are what you should use on him. But farm him, he's good. Admin Rifleman, this is actually one of the best damage dealers in the game at the moment because of a sort of lesser known stat. So every unit in the game, SSRs, many units in the game, will have a stat called damage reduction. So if you go to like, where is it? If you go to like Awakened Hilda, does not show here. Okay. Basically, there's a stat in the game called damage reduction, max damage reduction, and I don't know why it's not shown here. So here it is. So you look at damage taken limit 5%. Only allows the corresponding percentage of incoming damage, and damage it decreases the surplus by 80%. So different units have different damage taken limits, and so even if you have a unit that does 1,000,000 damage, if it hits an Awakened Hilda, after the first 5% of her total HP, that damage will be reduced by 80%. So eventually your damage will drop off significantly if you are only shooting one single target attack that does a ton of damage. So actually, characters like Gain, which only have slow attack speeds but do tons of damage to each attack, are going to be doing less damage more often than not than your admin riflemen, because they shoot extremely quickly and they do a ton of damage when they shoot. You can increase their attack, roid them up a lot, and they'll just do tons of damage. Increase attack every 1% time by 1% every time they basic attack, which is going to be constantly. Actually up to 2% with their level 5. And so if you get them, you should use them absolutely. They are one of the best units in the game, actually. The only problem with them is that they're kind of squishy, so make sure you put them behind a good front line. But you should use them even in teams that are not soldier teams. Use them in all of your teams. Admin Shieldman, this is probably the best soldier tank in the game at the moment. They're very cheap to cost, and they will taunt things. They have increased durability, and they will get a barrier at low HP as well. Since they're so cheap, you can sort of just spam them when they die, And yeah, they're good. They're worth using if you're trying to build a soldier team. Although there are probably better tanks overall in the game, but if you get them, use them. They're good. Choi Ina, this is actually a pretty decent unit. The only problem is that she will get power crept by Sigma, who's coming next month. Because what Choi Ina does is she will increase skill haste, which is actually very good, and she will also give you a little bit of deployment resources. However, when you look at a character like Sigma, Sigma will just provide way more buffs and way better buffs. She'll provide damage resistance for disadvantage, roll disadvantage. She'll give you even more deployment points, as you can see with her both special skill and her ultimate skill, and she'll spawn a very big additional unit as well. So eventually Sigma is going to just power creep her next month, but she's an okay unit to use in the meantime. She only costs 2, so feel free to use her. Mia, this is one of the not so good snipers in the game. She does okay damage, but there's just other things that will do way more than her. She costs 4, so she's really expensive and doesn't provide much for the stats, so I would advise not using her unless she's waifu. Although you can give her some XP because there is a counter case on her, so you can get the free rewards from there. Hans Rim, this unit's bad, has very low stats, and even though it's meant to counter, defenders, it actually doesn't do that much damage to defenders, and to other units it's just awful. She's just awful. So I would advise not using her at all. Naoko Minato, this guy is cheap, he costs 2, and he's decent as a filler unit. He looks like a typical anime protagonist. His ultimate skill will hit basically the entire field, and it's pretty decent, but other than that, there's better units around. Feel free to use them if you want to, but otherwise, don't feel bad. Ogami Masaki, this guy wanted to be a striker and a defender at once, and he fails at both. He is one of the worst tanks in the game, and you should not touch him with a 5-foot pole. Frederick Yuma, this unit is pretty bad. I would advise not using her. She has a little bit of her own, a little bit of an attack buff to herself, and a little bit of AoE damage and knockback, but in general, there's just way stronger options for way better stats for the cost, so I would not advise using her. Ballista, this is a tower, which already puts it at a disadvantage because it can't move, it can't shoot the enemy at all, the enemy backline or the enemy ship, and it provides really no value outside of just sitting there and being a defensive structure, and so there's better things to use. I would advise avoiding it. Brownie Moore, I've not seen this unit used, so I can't really speak on it, but I don't think it's particularly great. If you're using a soldier team, then it can be pretty decent because she can add remove the debuffs, remove any debuffs on them. So good in sword and content, but in general, I haven't really seen this unit used. And that's it for SRs. On to our suppressor. This is going to be a unit you're going to get a ton of early on, and they'll be an okay filler unit early on. Later on, phase them out. They just don't provide much for the cost. Hound, this is actually one of the better mechs in the game despite being only an R unit. It's actually very tanky, as you can see, tons of HP, good defense, and it'll taunt things. Basic attacks force their targets to attack it for 5 seconds, so this thing will taunt enemies and knock them back and get some good damage resistance. So actually, this unit's very easy to raise to max limit break because it's an R unit, you'll get tons of them, and you should use them even in non-mech teams starting out because it'll be one of the better tanks in the game. The tank is a good tank. Tactical Transporter reduced in half. Don't use this unit unless you want to get transported into the poop dimension because this unit is god-awful. Don't use it at all. It does absolutely nothing. It costs 4, and it provides you with a couple of 2-cost units. It's bad. UBGL Rifleman. This unit's actually worse than the normal Rifleman because it has a grenade launch animation which will slow down its overall attack speed and overall damage, so don't use them. Stinger Gunner. This is a ground unit that attacks air units exclusively, and it can be okay in fields and in certain stages which only have air units or are very dominant by air units, but there's better options around, like as we said previously, units like Why can't I think of her name right now? Karen Wong. Gonna do way better for you than Stinger Gunner. But if you're having trouble carrying, if you're having trouble beating the early simulations for anti-air training, then you might want to dump a few levels in her, because you'll get her to max limit break pretty easily as an R unit. Mortar Team. This unit is pretty dang awful. It's meant to sit back and hit the enemy backline from your backline, but it has pretty low attack speed, doesn't do enough damage to justify using it. Don't use it. PZH Mobile Gun, this unit's pretty dang bad. It just does nothing for the cost 3, and it does no damage. So it's meant to counter towers, but no one uses towers in PvE or PvP, so it's bad, don't use it. ZSU Shilka. This unit actually has decent anti-air. It'll buff your surrounding units' anti-air damage by 10%, actually 20% at max level. Just there's other units that'll hit air better. It does have a very fast attack speed, so that's kind of nice, but it's pretty bad, to be honest. Don't use this unit, really, unless you're desperate. The MA1 Humvee. This unit is pretty bad as well. When it dies, it'll deploy 2 of the crappy riflemen, but it's 3 cost. It sits there, it tanks a little bit, then it dies. It has low stats. Don't use it. Chariot, another unit that just has no stats, another crappy mech unit. You'll see a pretty common line here, all these crappy R mech units. They're pretty much all bad. It sort of runs at things and then will die and do AoE damage, but when your unit has to die to be valuable, you're probably in the wrong place already, and even when it does die, it doesn't do much, so don't use it. Cindy Looper, this unit's actually very good. You'll get a ton of them because you can drop them from maps and also from your recruitment. They can be very tanky. Because you can increase her HP a lot with leveling up her passive. She buffs herself a lot with that. Her special skill will give her HP regen, so she'll be able to sit in the front line and just tank for a while, and every 20 seconds or so, she'll heal herself up and get some damage resistance. And eventually, once her ult goes off, she will restore a ton more of her HP and just keep going forever. She's very good, especially with her best friend that'll come up to later. Claudia Nelson. This is actually probably the second best healer in the game, because when you drop her down, she will immediately restore up to 20% of the HP of all allies on the field, so she's pretty clutch in that sense. So she'll her special skill will heal a lot, her allies for a lot. It's on low cooldown, even lower with her level up. So put CDR gear on, she'll be constantly healing, and just has tons of heals for days. Second best healer in the game. If you use Evelyn on your first team, you should use her on your second team. Amy Strickland, this unit's pretty bad, just does nothing for the cost. Increases skill haste, but her skills aren't even that good. Just a little bit of AoE damage, and even still her damage is not good. She's an R unit with low stats, no HP, no real attack, just don't use her. Kim Chol-Soo, this unit doesn't even have animation. It doesn't even have animation, it's bad. He exudes a strong presence, so he'll taunt things, but yeah, don't touch this guy. Hirose Aki, this is actually one of the better defender R units, because when you use her passive, she will restore 10% of her HP when she uses her skills, so she can actually be fairly tanky. Her skill's on a very low cooldown, 15 seconds, actually 10 seconds at max level, so if you keep her alive for 10 seconds, she'll actually be healing quite a lot and have good damage resistance, and yeah, if you need a sort of off-tank bruiser unit for one of your second, third, fourth teams, then feel free to use her. Lee Mincio, this unit I've never seen used before. It has some okay debuffs, I guess. 5% attack speed debuff, 10% more on special skill, and all the attack speed debuffs, and pretty much, yeah, just only attack speed debuff, not good, has no stats to go behind it. This unit's pretty bad. Assault Trooper, this unit's actually one of the better soldiers in the game because it has pretty good attack speed. You can drop it anywhere on the field, so you can drop it on the back line and have them try to kill the back line. They have some pretty decent attack and pretty decent HP. So you'll get a bunch of them and feel free to use them. Ironside, this is actually a very good unit as well because you will be using him in mech teams. Don't use him if he's not in a mech team, because he will increase attack speed of mechs within his special skill radius and he'll heal them by a bunch. Also, when you deploy him, he will immediately restore HP on mechs by up to 25%, and if you have tanky mechs like Hound, or Evolved one will coming on later, then you will actually be healing a lot. He'll be increasing, buffing up your mechs a lot, and if you're using mechs, just throw him in and enjoy him. He's 2 cost, he's good. Yang Hassel, this unit is not good. Every 4th basic attack, he'll get an enhanced attack, actually 2 attacks on his passive after you level up to max. And other than that, he just does a little bit of AoE damage, but his damage stats is not that good. His HP is very low. He will die quickly. Probably shouldn't use him. Fiona, this unit is a decent tank if you need an extra tank for like your 3rd squad or whatever. When you drop her in, she'll charge into the enemy lines and taunt the enemies around her, and she just has tons of taunts, and she'll cast some barriers on herself, which will make her decently tanky, but there's probably better tank options around, so maybe don't use her. If you do need a tank though, she's perfectly viable. Una Springfield, this unit costs 2 and is still pretty bad. It just, she has a little bit of increased attack, it's a little bit of AoE damage, but overall her stats are just super low, so better off avoiding her. Ingrid Johanna, this is a unit that's very good in PvP and pretty awful in PvE. She's an absolute glass cannon, has pretty low HP, but when you drop her in the back line, she'll be a little bit, have some evasion and do some pretty dang good damage. So use her in PvP, she'll catch some people by surprise, but otherwise, not really worth using. Thaddeus Morgan, this unit's actually not too bad, but there's better options around. He can execute supporters and snipers with 15% or lower HP, and so he can actually be pretty good for that. But in general, I'd say there's better units around, so unless you're desperate, probably better off using other units. Kim Cho-won, this unit is mediocre. She'll get a little bit of increased skill haste, which it just lets her use her other abilities, which do just a little bit more damage. So yeah, I'd say better units that provide more utility around. Very squishy, mediocre attack. Probably should not use her. Oseiram, this unit is pretty bad. It's a bruiser sort of unit that doesn't have much HP for sort of a frontliner, and has mediocre attack. She inflicts AoE damage on her deployment spot, and her abilities don't really do much of anything. Just use Hilda, you already have her, this unit's bad. Park Hyun-soon, this unit's also pretty dang bad. It's a striker that buffs strikers a little bit, but there's better ways to buff your strikers, so don't touch him. His stats are pretty bad. Ari Alford, this is the best friend of Cindy Looper. These units go together very, very well, like bread and butter. Because Ari Alford, what she will do, she'll tank, and she also will increase strikers' damage resistance by up to 16% around her. So she'll make your other units very tanky. You combine that with your Cindy Looper damage resistance and healing, and you can have a really unkillable, really strong front line, especially for the early game. She has some knockback and some AoE damage, and gives herself some more damage resistance. She has good tank stats. You should actually use her in a like 3rd squad. You should combine her with Cindy Looper, and you'll actually have a very good front line. Jessica Green, this unit is god-awful. You should probably not touch her. She's a soldier that has skills that don't really do anything. Drops a claymore that does very little damage. She's a striker that has a frontliner, but she has no HP and no attack, so don't use her. Charlie Rockwood, Dwayne The Rock Johnson here. So he has okay HP, no attack, and he provides pretty much no utility. He has 1 taunt, and that's really it. So better off avoiding this unit. It's not good. Bomi, this unit's cute, but that's pretty much it. She has a little bit of utility. She's not the worst unit in the game. She can increase her evade and actually be decently survivable for a little bit on deployment. And she'll drop a decoy that'll draw enemy fire for a little bit and then explode. but in general, there's better options for her, so unless she's waifu, don't use her. Although she does have a counter case, which will give you a bunch of free resources, so feel free to use level up for that, and use her as just a filler unit. She's okay then. She has 2 cost, so she's cheap to use, so it's fine to use. Tommy the Die Hard. This is a Tommy and the Losers is pretty accurate. This unit drops in with his 2 friends, and they're all pretty bad. He costs 3, but in reality it's more like 2 because you get 1 deployment resource when the tank, the defender here, Tom, dies. And so basically what happens is you get 1 shield man, you get 1 suppressor, and you get 1 rifleman for the cost of 3, reduced to 2 after you the passive goes off, and it's just not that good of a deal, so you're better off just deploying the base units themselves, because it turns out that only having 1 of each unit is worse than having 3 of just 1 type of unit. Cho Hojin, this is a unit that has a counter case, and so you should level her just for the free rewards there, but other than that, she doesn't really have anything. She can debuff evade for a little bit, and decrease crit for a little bit, but other than that, there's better units with better stats. As you can see, she has no HP, very little attack, so there's just way better options. And that's it for our units. Back to N units. This is, there's only a few, and they're actually not too bad. Rifleman is actually very good, especially early game, because you just plop them down, they have very fast attack speed, they're squishy, but you get 3 of them, and they have decent attack, and so you just drop them down, you can limit break them extremely quickly, level them up very quickly, they're very cheap to use, and they'll do decent early game. Later on you're going to phase them out, but early game, yeah, they're fine to use. Shieldmen, pretty much in the same boat, you get 2 of them, and they're decently tanky. They have 3k HP times 2, and has some decent damage resistance if you level up his passive, and has a taunt as well. So feel free to use them early game if you don't have a decent tank, but it'll be phased out pretty quickly. Sniper, this unit is really bad. Fires a sniper rifle and just has no damage, no HP, don't use them. Sparrow, this is a mech that flies, and it's actually pretty good. It'll catch you by surprise. You get 2 of them. They have pretty bad attack and decent HP, but since they're flying, the HP isn't that big of an issue. And they have good hits, so they're good for fighting evasion units. And they're actually decent to catch things by surprise. Woodpecker, in the same boat, really. You drop it down, it drops some bombs on people. Good against rangers, which are pretty prevalent, especially in the story. Has really good HP. This is definitely the better of the 2. But yeah, feel free to use this guy early on. Eventually you'll probably phase him out, but he's actually usable. Adamant Sniper, this unit's not too bad. She will focus on the enemy backline, just stay still. So make sure you don't deploy her at like the very back, because she won't move up with the front line. But she actually does pretty good damage. As you can see, she has 4.6k attack, and she can actually do some pretty good work in PvP. Nina Anderson, this unit is god-awful, don't touch her. Maya Hunt, this unit is also pretty bad, you should probably not touch her, unless you need something to hit ground for some reason. She only costs 2, I believe, so I don't know, if you need something really cheap that has decent attack, maybe, but shouldn't use her really. Lee Defoe, this unit is bad, don't use him. Troy Gangson, another unit that's really bad and you should not use him. Shim Somi, this unit, I've never seen anyone use her, she's pretty dang bad. This is a unit that you fight in the first versus AI battle on the gauntlet. The first battle is guaranteed to be a versus AI battle, and she's one of the units that spawns, and you can just see how bad she is there. She's not good. Xena Bird, another unit that's really bad, don't touch her, she's bad. Kathy Wade, this unit's actually pretty dang good for a common unit, because she will increase your ranger's attack speed around her by 10%, buffs up attack, and does a little bit of AoE damage. So she can actually be pretty decent early game, although there's better buffers late game. So use her early, phase her out eventually. And that is every unit in the game. Another side note on Irie Alfred that I forgot to mention. Irie Alfred, she's going to be pretty good combined with Cindy Looper early, but later on, she will also get actually a very good rearm, as you can see here. Best mascot, Irie Alfred. She gets really tanky, and gets a barrier. She's just an absolute meatball. As you can see here, I have like 10k HP, and she will be an absolute tanky beast. So yeah, save her for then. She'll be usable then as well. And that's every unit in the game reviewed. So hope you guys find this useful, and see you in the future.